So, welcome everyone to another Q&A on the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord. Our guest today is Rafe Kelley, and he has been the subject of a couple voices with Vervecki and has talked with John as well on his channel. Now, as I was looking into Rafe in preparation for this, I basically came to the conclusion that Rafe Kelley is a real-life Batman. And I'm not exaggerating on that. He started training in martial arts at age 6, and he studied Tang Soo Do, Aikido, Kung Fu, kickboxing, BJJ, Muay Thai, Capoeira, and Sistema. At 8, he met his mentor, who I imagine as Liam Neeson, as Raj Al Ghul in Batman Begins, who trained Rafe in movement, roughhousing with him daily, allowing him to roam the woods for hours each day, introduced him to texts like the Iliad and the Odyssey. He discovered a love of anthropology and evolutionary biology, which he studied later in college. At 15, he began studying gymnastics, and at 23, discovered parkour. And if you haven't watched the video of Rafe that I posted in the announcements, you really need to watch it. It's quite incredible. Plus, his channel is filled with amazing videos to watch. Rafe went on to co-found Parkour Visions, where he was the head instructor, and then developed the idea for Evolve Move Play. And he's been traveling the world teaching, studying, and immersing himself in movement and research. So like I said, he's got the training, philosophy, martial arts. He's basically Batman. So thank you, Rafe, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'll usually just start off asking a couple introductory questions. So you're the founder of Evolve Move Play. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, I do want to. I wanted to say something about my mentor because it made me laugh. You imagine him in your head as Ra's al Ghul, which is really funny because he was a gay man who was a hairdresser, and he was from the Appalachian region. So he was from the corner where North Carolina, West Virginia, and Virginia all meet. He had a Virginian accent. He was very slender. He actually looked like the very Anglo versions of Jesus, right? You know that slender blonde Jesus that you see in all the pictures being hanged. Looked like that, but with worse teeth and more English. Just thought that was funny.
So not Ra's al Ghul, but Ra's al Ghul in spirit, perhaps.
Evolve Move Play. What was the question about Evolve Move Play?
Well, just tell us about it. What is it? And tell us all about it.
Yeah. So the basic idea of Evolve Move Play is that human beings evolved to be sedentary. That one of the fundamental problems that we have in the current world is lack of movement, but that we evolved to learn and acquire movement, to experience movement a lot through play. Animals that have almost all animals have to move in order to survive, right? But actually, they acquire a lot of their movement skill through play as juveniles. The more kind of really complex an animal is, actually, the more it plays. Human beings play more than any other animals. Somehow our culture has forgotten that and has started to view play as very frivolous and whimsical and as not part of the important aspects of development. Something that we need to recover. What was the idea behind the name? It's evolved quite a bit since I originated it. So I had been doing parkour. So I started Evolve Move Play in 2013, doing parkour at that point since 2005, so 8 years. Even a year into my parkour training, I had discovered an older French method called méthode naturelle, which included not just running, jumping, vaulting, etc., but also included swimming, lifting, carrying, throwing, and self-defense. I was interested right away in bringing all these things together in one method. A gymnastics background, a martial arts background, I wanted to kind of have a method that incorporated all of that. So I actually started developing the antecedents of Evolve Move Play back in 2006, 2007. But I was working with what became MoveNat and the founder of what became MoveNat. I didn't feel that project was quite going where I wanted. And I felt like part of it was that there was no one art within what we created that either of us had mastery of. So I decided that parkour was where I was going to focus and reach a level of mastery that could give me an insight into that process that I could carry into a broader discipline. So I stuck with parkour until 2015. And then by that time I had run into all the play research, and I had brought that play orientation to it, and I'd run into Ido Portal and the ideas around movement, brought that into it. And so I was teaching and doing all this stuff with Evolve Move Play. And I noticed this interesting trend, which was that I was very scientifically minded, and I did a lot of primary research on mechanics and on strength and conditioning and on how people, evolutionary theory. And I would share stuff about that so people could understand better how to move. People appreciated that about me, the education that I brought. I noticed that as I wove my own personal life story into my teachings, that had a much bigger impact on me. So I started to see this power of storytelling and ask myself, what's going on there? How do I understand that better? And I can't remember actually if it was a friend of mine or if it was just YouTube, but one way or another in October of 2016, like I suspect many of you in the room, I was exposed to Jordan Peterson through his interview on the Joe Rogan podcast. And I was interested in the political aspect of what he was talking about. But as he got into his maps of meaning and his archetypes, that was when eyes really lit up. And I got very interested. So it just happens because I teach primarily outdoors that I don't really teach that I haven't traditionally taught any seminars between November and March. From November to March, instead of listening to podcasts about strength and conditioning and reading things about strength and conditioning, I consumed everything that Jordan Peterson had put out that I could. I listened. By March, when I taught my first seminar, I think I'd listened to 160 hours of his content, listened to both personality and maps of meaning lectures completely. When I went to teach, and I kept asking myself this question, like, why am I obsessed with this guy's work? What does it have to do with my work? And I went out to teach in March, and all of a sudden I saw that this evolutionary frame I was applying to movement and how movement could impact you as a human being actually very much in line with the sort of evolutionary frame that Peterson was looking at human behavior in general from. You can map them very close to each other. That was very interesting because it wasn't until I was actually teaching a workshop I would start talking about something that would trigger something I remembered from having listened to Peterson, and I would see the connection between. It only became clear why it was so interesting to me. The act actually teach. I dug very deep into his work and into the question of the meaning, and I ended up getting connected with people in the embodiment community, and started to had independently been really running into a lot of people in the world of nature connection, which is obviously related to the natural parkour element of what I do, and so these things were coming together. And then I found Vervaeke's work and started talking to Vervaeke, and his idea of the ecology of practices really hit home for me and described what I'd kind of organically grown through my workshops and research. So we've come to think of what we do as essentially a system of self-transformation, right? Or an ecology of practices. We're building an ecology of practices that afford transformation, your own potential for greatness in service of the good. And you do that with what we think of as the primary connections that people need, which are connection to their body and movement, connection to community, connection to the natural environment, and connection to mind. There's 4 pillars in what we do. And our idea of what the greatness is we need to facilitate the capacity to see clearly the world, right? as it is, which is kind of the archetype of Horus, then we need to be able to articulate what we see and develop knowledge out of it, which is we use Socrates as our archetype for that. And we need to be able to cultivate in ourselves the strength, both physically and emotionally, to utilize that knowledge. We don't want to be Nietzsche's intellectual with a giant ear and a shrunken and atrophied body. We want to actually embody these things. And we need strength, we need emotional courage to do that. And so for us, strength is the archetype is Thor or Hercules. And the emotional archetype is, again, Socrates or the Buddha. And then you need skillfulness. We love the Celtic god Luch as a representation of skillfulness. Have skills to apply to solving these problems. All of that helps you solve that anomaly that can happen at any time in your life. That helps you engage in that sense of transcendence and meaning in your life. So we gain meaning from being connected to things that give meaning to life, and we gain meaning through being oriented in a process of becoming the most heroic version of ourselves. So that's quite a long answer. So I hope it was interesting.
Oh yes, that was great. That was fascinating. Now your work is obviously very physical, and it demands sort of peak physical fitness. And now not everybody is in peak physical fitness. So what do you say to the people who aren't ready to jump through trees and use the world as their jungle gym? How would you apply? How could they apply what your methods and what you've done without having
our
to have
method
that
is
training?
actually designed for all levels, for all physical levels. The expression of it that you see within me is someone perhaps at the peak of physical ability, but it doesn't matter so much, right? So I can jump between two tree branches, say 30 feet off the ground. For me, that's a useful thing because I've conditioned myself in many ways, and it provides an edge I can sharpen myself on. But as far as its capacity to transform me, it's no more profound, at least not in any fundamental way. Somebody who's totally unfit doing their first jump at ground level. If that moment of the jump is formative to them. That's what we're aimed at, is the transformation of the character through the means of the physical. And if that's the case, it's not so much about how much you can accomplish. That's we love that and we care about it, but ultimately the value of the journey isn't measured in the heights of the physical achievements. It's measured in how much change you can make, how profound that change is, that individual's character. So our students range in age from 3 years old to 73 years old. We've had people who are extremely overweight, people who have not trained, in 20 years, or 30 years, or 40 years. Actually, one of our regular students in our classes is recovering from a traumatic brain injury. So, he's gone from really being able to lift up his left leg to being able to do step vaults and crawl under branches and little bits of climbing. So it's absolutely for everybody. For me, it doesn't matter where you start from. Not addressing the body as part of your self-transformation practice, you're missing something of extraordinary importance. You are a body, and you can't escape it. And if you don't have that integrated into your self-transformation practice, it can never be what it could be.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and and certainly we can all take that. And John's just started in his meditation class, for example, teaching some more of the body work for us. So everyone should check that out. He's doing some Tai Chi like movements in this week's lesson. So there's a bridge there. So great. I'd like to thank you so much for that. I'd like to open up for questions now. I think what we started doing yesterday with John was to have people queue up their questions. You don't have to write out the full question, but maybe if you're interested in a question, put it in the event listening party chat. And if you don't have a mic and would like me to read it out, or for whatever reason want me to read it out, just let me know. So I think Strawn has the is first up. So go ahead, Strawn.
Hi, Rafe. Can you hear me?
I can.
Right. Yeah. So I noticed that you brought up two things in your conversations with John Vervaeke. The one was the issue of being and becoming, and the other was pragmatic value versus objective truth. And I was wondering if you connect those dots at all, and if you do, then how?
I missed about half of that, Strawn.
Okay, so you brought up two things to John Vervaeke: being and becoming, and then objective truth versus pragmatic value. And I was wondering if you connect those dots at all, and if you do, then how?
I haven't thought about the relationship between the idea of being orientation and becoming orientation, and how that relates to a objective worldview versus a pragmatic worldview.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thanks for your question. Think about it.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, well, several, but I was, I don't know. It's a bit outside the ambit of a quick Q&A question. So if you really want me to get into it, then I could get into contact with you somehow. But yeah,
send me an email.
Thanks a lot.
I'd love to hear.
Okay.
All right, thanks, John. So Skylar Huckleberry, go ahead.
Hello. My question is sort of about parkour and circumambulation and cultural landmarks or national monuments. I was wondering if you've ever considered having a course that truly moves all the way around a central object. And I know that afterwards you often go into campfires or other ways of dialoguing about the experience. And I'm just wondering how those can be brought at a local level. I live in beautiful Arizona. I can think of places that I could take you in all the way around a mountain. And then we could go on top of that mountain and talk about going all the way around that mountain. Things like that. So
You're interested in the idea of how kind of having a completed journey would provide a capacity for insight generation.
That's it. Circumambulation. Peterson has talked about the church where a maze, you have to go through all quadrants before you're allowed into the center of it. So you kind of walk the journey for everyone, and it allows you to see it from many angles, many perspectives.
Interesting. I mean, it's not something that we do within parkour, right? Parkour tends to be about finding very kind of resource-dense areas that offer a lot of potential to explore movement. So I like to think about parkour as being kind of a terrain-based sport in the same way that mountain biking and downhill skiing, freestyle skiing, surfing, etc. are. It's about finding these areas that offer lots of potential for movement in, and then exploring them really deeply. Sorry, my daughter's talking in the background. We do, within my work, do some longer movements. Like at our big retreat, we do a big journey around an alpine area. We do what's called the Chain Lakes Trail, go all the way around it. But I've never specifically tried to think about that from a ritual standpoint. One thing that I've been dealing with a lot recently is just starting to think about in my work is the role of ritual. If you guys have all read, I imagine some of you have read Maps of Meaning, and they have that. He has that description of the development of knowledge, right? We move from exploratory behavior to imitation of that exploratory behavior, play to ritual. And from ritual to narrative and drama, or drama and narrative literature, then only later into philosophy and very late into something like science. And I notice a commonality with that in the way that we essentially how movement behavior is generated. You can look at a group of people who are just starting to learn parkour, and they'll go to an area. They will start exploring that area. And then over time, they'll start to notice some kind of movement sequence or movement particularly intriguing, and then they'll repeat that movement. Often one person will find a movement and other people will then adopt the movement that they're working on. Once that movement is starting to get well controlled, what you'll see is people start adding variation to it. A lot of what play is essentially taking a behavior that has shown that it's adaptive and adding variations to it because it builds your behavioral flexibility. In some sense, all of parkour is kind of play because you're doing that. But you can see even within it, there's this same sequence. Now, at our big retreats, we do this climb through a waterfall, and it's at the end of the third or fourth day. It's kind of the peak of the event, and we run down this creek for about 2 hours to get to this waterfall. And usually people have been moving that day for about 7 or 8 hours by the time we get to the waterfall. And they have to climb through this waterfall, and it's a tunnel in a rock. It's a chimney, basically, that you're stemming up through as the water is pouring down on your head. And there's really no way to completely prepare someone for getting in there because you've never experienced anything like it. And there's no way to describe it, and I can't really take you in there and do it with you. You have to go through it. So I think of that as kind of the initiation ritual that we use. And so we welcome everybody, and it's kind of like being reborn through the earth. Mm-hmm. And so I think about this idea of that as a ritual. But I think that lately I've been thinking about the idea that like that ritual, there's ways of manipulating the rituals to make them more powerful. And we're kind of discovering ritual within our practice, but we don't necessarily have the same technology that traditional religions have or shamanic traditions have. And so I'm very interested in, like, I've thought about the idea of fasting for 24 hours and then going to do this ritual, doing some very, very intense physical stuff to put myself into an altered state, and then going through it, and then using that as an insight generation tool. I don't know if that's precisely along the same lines of what you were asking about.
It really was. Thank you. If you ever
that's kind of where we're thinking about ritual coming into our practice.
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to pick up on that for a second. So I don't know how much you've spent looking at John's idea of the religion that's not a religion. I've thought that he talks a lot about the importance of ritual and rituals that can be borrowed from other traditions, but it seems to me that for the religion that's not a religion to really take off, it needs to have its own rituals, new rituals that have been designed specifically for it, in the modern day. Do you have any thoughts on that, about the development of new rituals? And I should ask, what are your thoughts on the religion?
Sorry. So John and I just recorded another conversation. I reached out to him to talk about a set of insights that I'd had during my sit spot practice, kind of combining ideas from Peterson with David Abrams, who's a ecology philosopher, who wrote a book called The Spell of the Sensuous, and he's kind of in the tradition of Merleau-Ponty from the phenomenology tradition, and then reading C.S. Lewis to my kids. And all this came together, and at the end of my conversation with John, he said to me, "You know what you've done, right?" And I was like, "What?" And he said, "You've created a church." And that's a hard one for me. I mean, there's a truth to it, and there's It seems to me, as we're watching the craziness that's unfolding across America right now, that the old idea that you really can't get rid of religion in people. You can only replace religion with some other religion, and if you do it carelessly, if you just try to tear it out, a lot of times what replaces it is much less sophisticated and delivers a lot less value. I'm very interested in that idea, and I listened to Paul Vanderklay and Jonathan Pageau, some of the folks who are arguing for like a full recommitment to Christianity. And when honestly, when Peterson put out the biblical series, I told my wife, like, when I get done watching this, I might be a Christian. I haven't become. I just don't have the felt sense that there is a something outside of nature. Two worlds mythology is unintuitive to me. Mm-hmm. And it feels like to adopt the two worlds mythology requires me to fudge my epistemology in a way that doesn't feel correct to me. So in any event, I guess I'm very much in John's camp of we need religio. We need to somehow divorce it from dogma. And I'm not 100% sure how to do that. What I notice is that within some of these practices, it seems like there's religious or spiritual dimensions that are emerging. It's very interesting to me. Perhaps this is my bias. Perhaps I'm seeing how when you get a new car, you see that car everywhere. Mm-hmm. Maybe because I've looked at all this stuff, I see this in all sorts of people who are doing parkour. All of a sudden, it's like lots of people within the parkour community got interested in Jordan Peterson. People are reading The Hero's Journey. People are rediscovering Christianity or going into Taoism or going into Buddhism. It's like there's an incipient spirituality. I think there's a kind of incipient spiritual element to almost every sport that is truly a flow sport that really gives you deep access to flow state. I think perhaps the mental states that are associated with spiritual and religious experiences are very close to those states. So there's something that's already happening there. And then the question is, this is something that we need. Is there a way to leverage that to build those pieces that are missing? I've been to Christian services and I've been through the rituals, and for me, they were felt very empty and dead. And yet, I've seen people who have profound experiences from them. I feel like I'm seeing those same types of profound experiences through some of these movement events and other events like them. So I think the role of ritual is something that's very interesting, and it's also something that I don't feel like I have fully grokked yet.
Right. And that's understandable. Rituals evolved over many years, and we're talking about creating them, on purpose, just from scratch. And, I mean, that's a lot of what we're doing around here is talking about the religion that's not a religion and what it could look like. There's a lot of brainstorming going on right now.
Yeah. My bias on that, I guess, is it seems to me as inheritors of the West that a lot of the grammar that is going to be easiest for us to kind of function on is going to come from a Christian framework. I actually honestly believe that I'm not 100% certain about this because I've been very influenced by Peterson, and I haven't spent the same amount of time studying Taoism or Buddhism or some of these other traditions. It seems to me that what Vervaeke has articulated and what Peterson have articulated about the kind of core idea of Christianity within the pursuit of the logos and in treating the world with agape are kind of the best spiritual truths around which you can orient yourself. That's what, when I talked about the idea of building your capacity for greatness in service of the good, that's what I meant. We wrote out this whole roadmap to what we were trying to create with Evolve Move Play, and we talked about this idea of we need to create people with vision, capacity to articulate. We need to create people who are strong physically and emotionally. We need to create people who have skills that they can apply to solving problems. What I realized as I was looking at that was that I could describe someone who is great and evil as well as I could describe someone who is great and good. And that if you are pursuing something like that without looking beyond it towards the good, you don't know what you're empowering in some sense. So for me, the good has to be, in some sense, that capacity for agape. And the funny thing about that is that my practice of building agape in myself is Buddhist, right? I use metta meditation, which is part of the ecology of practices that John uses. It was taught to me by my friend Mark Walsh. Sorry, 1 second. Audrey, can you not be in here, please? Sorry, we're getting interrupted by children here.
That's all right. Not a problem.
The highest good is that agape principle. I use Buddhism. I think that the story of Christ archetypally is the most powerful expression of that I've ever encountered. And I think in Taoism and Buddhism, there's an extraordinary amount of wealth of wisdom that is actually very alignable with that basic vision. But where I get stuck is I cannot accept epistemologically commitment to the resurrection.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great answer.
Epistemology and children running back and forth.
Yeah, no, it's quite all right. So Nick's got a question.
Hey, Rafe. My name's Nick. This is a bit lighter of a question, but I was wondering if you ever came across the tricking community.
Yes.
Nice.
I don't know that much about tricking. Obviously lots of parkour athletes free runners have adopted tricks from the tricking community.
Right.
So we've learned lots of tricks. Like one of my core techniques that I'm working on right now that I have just sort of started to be able to land consistently is a corkscrew, which is really a basic tricking maneuver.
Yeah, I saw you do a Webster in the little video that someone posted in our chat. It got me thinking. That's great. So, yes. I know there's a lot of crossover between the communities and was curious.
Interestingly, my the guy who my core business partner, my number one tenant in what I'm doing, he has a strong tricking background. He's kind of a free runner who likes lots of tricking, and he's also a devout Christian. So it's kind of an interesting tension for us because I'm a very traditionally pure parkour guy and an atheist, and he's a tricker and a Christian. So we get
there was all that drama way back in the day when the two communities started really interacting with each other.
Oh yeah,
it's funny.
Yeah.
I guess the other question I had is somewhat related to that, and that's I was doing this tricking as a teenager, and I'm 30 now, and I still keep up the basics, but I don't have a whole lot of cartilage left in my knees to work with, and so I was wondering, as someone who's done these practices for a long time, how you have learned how to offset some of the damage that one can take keeping up a regular practice of a more extreme sport.
Yeah. Oh, this is a story I tell a lot, but I kind of adopted the framework of professional athletics, give a sense of meaning and purpose to my parkour, and the initial excitement of it wasn't working for me anymore. And I started some of the first competitive parkour events in North America and in the world, really. And I was competing in them at the same time that I was running them. I was like dieting down to get lean enough to be like an optimal body weight, because I'm a very big guy naturally. Most parkour athletes are between like 140 and maybe 180 pounds, and I'm naturally like over 200. So I wanted to get really light, and a panic attack my first competition. And there was a few other things going on in my life, but over the course of 18 months, I had subluxated my cuboid bone, tore ligaments in both my feet, 2 back spasms, tore an old rotator cuff injury, had an AC separation, acromyoclavicular separation, and my Achilles tendon, and then 11 months later, I had a high ankle sprain, and messed that up. Then that all happened between like, I guess, 27 and 30, between 2010 and 2012. And I healed up and was doing pretty good. So I came back from my Achilles tendon tear, and 9 months later, I was on the show American Ninja Warrior, and I just missed qualifying to go to Japan. That was the last year that they took athletes from the American show and sent them to Japan. So I was really happy about that. I beat all my local friends in the competition. I out Tim Sheaf. Pretty stoked about that. And then I went to the Apex competition and placed in competitions, and so I did well. But then I kind of lost my motivation for it. And I was coming back, compete 2013 at the North American Parkour Championships. And I was training with a student of mine who'd become very successful at that. And the week before it all went down, I retore my rotator cuff again. And I went and did the qualifying competition, and I finished third in the qualifying competition. And so I qualified in to compete. But the only way for me to make it through the first course would have required me to do a 16-foot running jump to a catch with my hands. I knew my shoulder would give out. I stopped. And after that, I basically looked in the mirror and said, you can keep taping yourself together for a couple more years and try to really push your competitions. You're probably going to take injuries that will limit you the rest of your life in being able to do this thing you love. Or you can shift your focus towards how can I have a sustainability focus on these practices. And so I had a few injuries in the last 7 years, nothing on the severity of what I've experienced then. And I've gotten really good at learning to deal with and overcome the little aches and pains that you get and to build up the system. I mean, the basic thing to remember about physical practices is that same things that injure you are the things that make you stronger. It's all about the dose. If you're trying to peak really hard right now, it's very possible that you're doing yourself damage long term. However, you can do the exact same things, and with just a little bit different mindset, you can actually be building a buffer that will make you more and more injury proof as you go forward. We have a whole aspect of what we do called body integrity practices, which is about looking at specific demands of whatever we most like to do, and then saying, how can we build up the buffers in our body so that we're not suffer injury. Also, we have to look at the lifestyle factors, not just the hour and a half of tricking that you do that hurts you. It's the 20 hours of sitting a day that hurts you. And so you can't necessarily, maybe when you're 18 and you're not very, and you don't have a full-time job, afford to go out to train, just throw down, and not take care of all of the bad stuff that's built up. But when you are stressed out and you've been working 60 hours a week sitting at a computer, you try to just go throw your tricks, you're going to hurt yourself. So you need to start to understand not only how the sport can hurt you and how to buffer yourself from that, how your lifestyle is hurting you, how to overcome that. I have a very long answer to that question, but that's actually a huge aspect of what we do. We have 4 pillars in our body aspect of our practice: body integrity, body to environment, body to object, and body to body practices. And we don't, you don't see that in like the video that was shared. It's a huge aspect of what we do because I'm 38 years old. In many ways, I'm performing the best that I've ever performed, and there's very few other people in the sport who are doing something.
Right. Yeah, that was great. Thank you for answering. And that's definitely a great point, that it's a lot less of the immediate activity and how the rest of your life is lending itself to that activity or not.
Okay, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. I have to highlight this. So sorry about the kid thing, but this is really funny. The kids are running around stomping on the roof right now, which normally would be okay because like they're allowed to be climbers and to do crazy stuff. That's part of our lifestyle. But it's ironic. Their heroic quests are interrupting our conversations. At the moment, my poor wife is going crazy. She's on a call. I'm on a call. And the kids are been kicked outside so that they don't drive us crazy. And their answer to that was to climb on the roof and start jumping.
That's incredible. My kids would be very, very jealous. Sherry's up next.
Hi, Rafe. I have a question about mind-body. I've been really... Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. I've been really curious about why we have a body. That might seem like a strange question or a strange observation, but I'm a Christian, and I'm reading the early church fathers, and they really tackle this idea of body and mind quite often. So I just wanted to read you a quote, just to put it into context. So this is from Origen, and I'm not exactly sure when he wrote this, 2nd century or something. It is one thing to see and another to know. To see and to be seen is a property of bodies. To know and be known is an attribute of intellectual being. Whatever, therefore, is a property of bodies. And he's just going to get into a little bit of Christian jargon here.
You go back for a second because you broke your voice broke for a second for me there. I didn't hear you. You said see and be seen, and then you stopped.
Okay. It is one thing to see and another to know. To see and to be seen is a property of bodies. To know and to be known, an attribute of intellectual being. So then he talks about the relationship between the Father and the Son. And he says, whatever therefore is a property of bodies cannot be predicated either of the Father or of the Son, but what belongs to the nature of deity is common to the Father and the Son. Finally, even he himself, in the Gospel, did not say that no one has seen the Father save the Son, nor anyone the Son save the Father. But his words are, no one knows the Son save the Father, nor anyone the Father save the Son. By which it is clearly shown that whatever among bodily natures is called seeing and being seen, is termed between the Father and the Son a knowing and being known by the means of power of knowledge, not by the frailness of the sense of sight. Okay, so without getting all caught up in the weeds of Christian doctrine, my question is, whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist, you're moving towards transcendence, right? You're moving towards something above you. And that connection is made by the mind. What is the purpose of the body in that relationship? Because it has a purpose. So what exactly is the purpose of the body in a transcendent relationship?
You did break up again for a little bit. So where were you? Without getting caught up in
the weeds?
Yeah, without getting caught up in the weeds. I think you broke down there.
Okay. So my question is, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can now. We'll see how long it lasts.
Okay, sorry about that. My question is, if you are pursuing transcendence, whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist, what is the role of the body? Because I gather that transcending is kind of something that is exclusive to the intellect, to the mind. But I understand that the body plays a role in that. So my question is, what is that role that the body is playing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and might be answered very differently from different perspectives. First thing that occurs to me is I always root things in an evolutionary perspective. First question to me is not what is the purpose of the body, but what is the purpose of the evolutionarily.
Sorry, you just broke up there a bit, Rafe. Can you just repeat that?
I said, what is the purpose of the body in a kind of spiritual context is the question. And the first thing that occurs to me is actually to reverse the question. What is the purpose of the mind? Because I always tend to first root things in evolutionary perspective. As Jordan Peterson talks about, it's kind of the outermost frame that you can't get beyond. Me, anyway. And what we know from evolutionary perspective is that the mind evolves to control a body. That it is, as the body becomes more complex and in need of more control, the nervous system becomes more complex. So when we look at, there's an animal called a sea squirt, for instance, and sea squirts have two phases to their life. One phase in which they're mobile and one in which they plant themselves and basically sit a barnacle. What's interesting about that is that during the mobile phase of their life, they have a fairly extensive nervous system. Once they become sedentary, once they settle into their adult form, they actually digest their own brain, their own nervous system. It's no longer functional for the nervous system. The brain first evolves to control movement. My argument is always that we cannot optimize the function of the brain or the mind, the heart, the emotions, the nervous system without rooting it in the body. And this is something that Vervaeke talks about quite a lot. This is 4E cognitive science. Cognition is inherently embodied, embedded, extended, and enacted. What's come out of cybernetic theory, the recognition that if you try to design something that has the capacity of perception, it's actually very hard to get it to perceive the way that we perceive, unless you give it the capacity for a motor action that maps the type of motor actions that we do. So perception and action are, in some sense, mutually affording. You have to have both. And this is a critique of Christianity that comes out of Nietzsche, right? That have essentially sacrificed the world. We've sacrificed the body. What I can tell you from my personal experience is that in the pursuit of physical endeavors, I have experienced great deals of personal transformation. And that's kind of where I think my role in this whole conversation is. As a member of the conversation on meaning with Vervaeke and Peterson and all these people, what's unique about my perspective is that I have gone deeper into physical practice than almost everybody else. And I can then take those insights and that philosophy that is being shared by these people, and I can give it a grounding in physical practice. So I think that we have bodies for a reason, right? If we think about this spiritually, we could say that for some reason we're here and we have experiences, that the body is inextricable from those experiences. As Vervaeke points out, we can't even think without experiencing, without being physical. We've got a lot of feedback all of a sudden. I'm reading a beautiful book that you might want to pick up called The Spell of the Sensuous by David Abrams, who I mentioned earlier. It picks up a lot of the same themes that Vervaeke talks about, which is that essentially, like, when you think, you are, when you engage in your capacity for rational, intelligent knowing, those words, what they are is the representation of the motor actions of forming speech in your mouth, rooted in the sense, right?
Yep.
See something is to be rooted in the sense of sight. Something is to be rooted in the sense of feeling. So I don't have a sense of a other world that this is in service to. Even if you do, you might ask, is there not a reason we are here, that we have been given a type of mind that is inextricably linked to a body? That what we are is not, there is no cogito ergo sum. You have to have both to be a full being.
Yeah.
Being is embedded in body. And this is actually something my friend Andrew talks about, who is, like I said, a devout Christian. But he's he points very strongly to the idea that when Christ talks about the saving of everyone in the kingdom of heaven, everyone who died is going to come bodily back into existence. That the idea of the complete separation of soul and body is something that he sees as non-biblical. So that's getting into weeds of Christianity that are way beyond my pay grade. Perhaps something.
Okay, thank you very much, Rafe.
Well, I just want to say that was an incredible answer. So thank you very much for that. Next up is Tyler.
Hey, Rafe. I'm also 38, and I like Nick, very much enjoyed a similar style of running amok and doing as many twirls and twists and flips as I could at a younger age. But it's not necessarily the degradation of the body from that work, but I also have an autoimmune condition that has severely limited mobility in many ways. Are you aware of any sets of techniques or practices, or do you guys focus on any of that in your work that can provide some support for those who are limited in mobility in that way? And also, I took a
just 1 second. Cut out at basically you told me that you had an autoimmune condition.
Yeah.
I missed it. Apologize.
No problem. This is Discord. With the autoimmune condition, are you aware of any sets of techniques or practices that something that you guys focus on, perhaps, that can support individuals who have this limited mobility, not just in relation to age, but like my hands, for instance, are particularly weak in grip strength, but my legs may be fine for running and jumping. So that, and also I looked at the video of you running around in the woods. It was fantastic, and those trees are absolutely perfect. Do you think that we should build our world in such a way that our ordinary spaces have these kind of perfectly configured mobility areas, or is it more fun to go out into the world and try to find spots and use them as they are?
Okay, well, let's start with the autoimmune thing, and then we'll go into the where we should build our world and where are the resources. So the thing is, I actually have an autoimmune condition myself, or a couple. I have IBS, irritable bowel disease, and I have vitiligo since I was young. And I get quite sore from training, more so than most of my training partners, and I believe it's because I have a heightened inflammatory response to I have found that meditation does help. I can help my body release that that inflammation by meditating on it. I had a really profound experience with this where I was suffering very badly from IBS symptoms. It was making it hard for me to sleep. It was making it hard for me to be focused at work. I had brain fog all the time. And I had worked with a doctor who was helping me, giving me lots of supplements, and it kind of helped, but I just want to live my life like 40 different supplements at a time. And, they ran out, and I was in Europe, and I came back, and I was really suffering, and I had run into the work of my friend Dave Wardman, who does something called physical alchemy. We had talked about this idea of interoception, the idea that you can feel what's going on inside you. In the traditional Chinese, medicinal and Taoist culture, there's this idea that you could learn to essentially auto-regulate your organ system. You could learn to not auto-regulate, but to consciously regulate your organ systems if you are a strong enough meditator. Decided one day to sit down and meditate, and I did a concentration meditation for probably 10 minutes. And I did a body scan, and I used that body scan meditation to go into, and so basically I felt my breath filling my lungs repeatedly. Then I tried to take that into feeling my heart and trying to feel different parts of the heartbeat, and even trying to slow the heartbeat down by holding the pause longer. Have achieved that sometimes. It's pretty weird. And then I went from the heartbeat down into the stomach, right? And try to feel the blood around the stomach, then down into the small intestine, large intestine, the colon. I meditated on essentially getting the peristalsis of my gut to slow down. I meditated on this kind of cooling yin energy. And this is a little bit personal, but I was having between 12 to 16 bowel movements a day. The time leading up to that, and that day it was down to 6, and after that it was down to pretty much going forward. That was very powerful for me. I've also found the carnivore diet is very powerful for autoimmune conditions. I was quite skeptical when Peterson was doing it. I had friends who did it, gave it a try, and found the results really profound. So I'm not carnivore now. I've been trying to reintroduce things and see if they work for me, and I'm still kind of in the phase of trying to figure out what really works. But I have a greatly increased function. So that was question 1. Question 2, the trees and what do we do and how should we design our environment? So those trees are really beautiful, but I have found beautiful trees all over the world. And so I think a lot of times people don't see what's around them because it's not salient in their landscape, because they don't have the physical skills or awarenesses that would make them salient in their. People very often comment on my videos, oh, if I had trees like that, I would do that too. It's actually more the opposite. If they did what I did, then they would find the trees like that in there. Now, obviously, if you live in the middle of the Sahara Desert or the Arctic, that's not true. But in most major cities, there are some beautiful trees. In the area that has lots of trees, you can start. There is stuff out there. Our environments have been designed to easy for us to move around. And that's okay for certain purposes. But it's also taken us away from exposure to things that our bodies need. Bowman, who's a big influence on me, talks about flat ground as a cage. You're constantly missing these nourishments of uneven textures under our feet. Missing the nourishment of hanging from things, having to climb things. So I like to go to the zoo and look at the gibbon habitats and the primate habitats, and I think that like everyone should have a little bit of primate habitat in their house. Probably maybe every office should have a primate habitat zone. Human beings can go be primate. We forget that we are, but we are, and it actually is. I think it's quite surprising how much becoming a better monkey can contribute to becoming a better human being, or ape for that matter too.
Awesome. Thank you. And I appreciate the solidarity with the autoimmune condition. I think it's important. There seem to be so many people with autoimmune conditions toiling away, working in the world, and still able to cope and manage. So that's encouraging. I appreciate it. Thank
you. We're at about 7:35. I want to be respectful of your time, Rafe. Did you have any more time for a couple more, or should we?
Yeah, I have time for a couple more.
Sure. I think Michael. Mikhail?
Oh no, that's okay. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, you withdrew. And I think we're actually one question I wanted to ask is, so you have children, I have children, and you talk a lot about being a proponent of roughhousing, and so I try to let my kids roughhouse, but I usually draw the line at tears. What do you draw a line between the playing around rough and sort of beating each other up?
Yeah, so I mean, our rule is that it has to be consensual. Right? Sometimes my son will cry and he doesn't want to give up the game and head back and him to play. This is something that has been highlighted particularly in my son recently. It's something that reminds me of what Viveki played about. In our culture, we have this idea that play is whimsical and frivolous, and we think about play, we imagine laughing and skipping through the fields. The way children play is actually much more serious. Some of it is that you'll hear them giggling and they'll be shrieking, but also see them really pushing their edges. And sometimes that pushing their edge and the negotiation and dealing with the other kids is of intense emotions. You have to navigate those, and it's a huge aspect of what they're learning. So just the other day, my son's 5 years old, and there's a boy next door who's his main playmate who's 7 years old. The boy next door has been training body since. I haven't pushed Peter to kind of get as formal with his training in these things yet. He has some capoeira background and he's done some too, but he hasn't done as much. Formal striking, a round kick in the solar plexus, and he walked away, and he was a little bit, the wind knocked out of him, and tears in his eyes. I help them regulate because I don't want them to get out of control. But if he chooses to go back into the game because he feels like he's going to it, I'll stop him. The big thing is that we have the rule that you can't punch anybody unless you ask. You have to not be punching anything. When it's in play, when it's in a mutual kind of growing experience, then it's welcome. You can push each other as hard as you want. But as soon as it becomes about punishing the other person, then that's my.
That's excellent. I'm going to borrow some of that. So I think we've reached the end of our questions, and thank you so much. This has been amazing. Really appreciate your time, and you've clearly, just the depth of your thought is apparent in your answers. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Brett. I really appreciate it, and thank you to everyone who came and the question thing, and say David Wu there, student of movement, one of my friends in the group as well. That's cool to see this community coming together.
Yeah, sorry, you were breaking up there, but you know student of movement.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much, and thanks so much for everyone being here. Just to give a preview of events coming up later this week, Friday, we've got Layman Pascal coming at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. There's a live book reading about death at 5 p.m. Eastern on Friday. 12 Rules for Life discussion book group on Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and Awakening Your Inner Healer. These are organized by Lorene at 4 p.m. on Saturday. And make sure you check out our calendar, our Google Calendar. It's pinned in the announcements channel. And again, thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Tyler, for recording, and thanks, Rafe, for giving so much of your time. And I think everyone really enjoyed that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafe.
Yes.
All right, thanks, Ray, and you're welcome. You're welcome to come back anytime. We'd love to have you, and we'd love and check out our community as well. There's a lot of great discussions going on.
Good. I don't know how much time I have, but it is intriguing. So
thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, he figured it out. Great. Well, thanks everyone. That was another great event.